Hey everyone, GK here, and today I want to share my thoughts and experiences on playing through Pokémon Violet. Now, I want to make it clear that this isn't going to be a full, in-depth review, but rather my personal anecdote. The reason I wanted to do this is because Pokémon is a game that is completely out of my comfort zone. I've never played any Pokémon game before this, at least not to any real degree. I'm not a fan of turn-based RPGs in general. I have nothing against the genre, but I've always found them kind of boring. With each member of your party having an ever-increasing moveset, weapons, and armor, which ultimately boils down to just finding higher numbers, getting higher numbers through tedious grinding, and how often in these games, the player ends up hoarding tons of health items, which I kinda did during my gameplay, but that's neither here nor there. I thought I wouldn't like Pokémon for these same reasons, but I found myself enjoying it more than I thought I would. I know Pokémon Violet may not be the best jumping off point for the series, but I gave it a shot anyway, and I was pleasantly surprised. Now, I want to preface everything I'm about to say that, for lack of a better term, I didn't play the game correctly. I didn't play the game completely blind. In order to be more efficient with my time, I decided to look up the game's decks and decide on my team before I even played. So instead of catching and leveling up Pokemon as I went, swapping them out as I found new Pokemon, I hunted down and traded for my desired team from the get-go. I did not sub any Pokemon in or out the whole time. In hindsight, I regret doing this as having more than 6 leveled up Pokemon would have been very useful, especially if I fought against other players, as with a static team of 6, any other player could have easily countered me after our first fight. But before I dive too much into my time during gameplay, I should at least briefly mention my thoughts on Pokémon Violet as a game. It was a technical mess. Lots of frame drops, pop-ins, poor animations, glitches, and the lack of voice acting, which would make an otherwise interesting story sort of lose me due to my lack of patience in having me read, which resulted in me skipping most of the game's text. Music was good though, and I feel the need to mention, I'm going to say some things which anyone who's a fan of Pokemon will know to be very basic information. But I want to reiterate, this is my personal experiences as someone who has never played any of these games before, and my personal understanding of the mechanics. Leave a comment if you want to correct anything I say in error, or explain anything I expressed confusion about. Although admittingly knowing very little about the series, that is not to say I know nothing about it. I watched the anime a fair bit growing up, and I've watched plenty of Pokemon-themed YouTube videos, which I hoped would give me some foundational knowledge. Click on the eye in the upper right for an episode of my podcast where I talked about my personal history with Pokemon. I'll begin with the opening 2 or 3 hours of my time with Pokemon. After a rather lackluster character creation sequence, the game gave me the option of starters. Looking at starters of the past, I tend towards the fire side of the spectrum. However, in this case, I made the objectively correct decision of picking Sprigatito. Now, in the run-up of me playing the game and looking up my starter options, my dyslexia activated into overdrive and I read this as Spaghettio. I kind of regret not nicknaming it that. But I went with the ever-original Weed Cat. The opening few hours were what I feared the whole game would be like. Very slow, grindy, lack of options due to using whatever Pokemon I can find at the time, and the fear I would need to stockpile healing items. Even though I had my desired team in mind, I couldn't get them all straight away. However, once I acquired and settled in with my desired team, that is when I felt the game really opened up to me. Speaking of which, let me share what my team ended up being. As mentioned before, my main starter being Masquerada, and because I'm super casual when it comes to Pokemon, I decided on the more well-known Gardevoir and Lucario, as they had pretty solid designs and I liked their typings. I picked Weavile, which is my favorite Pokemon so far, and on the advice of Galadez from my chat, to balance out my team, they recommended Garchomp and Talonflame. Shout out to Lee for trading me the Gible and Sneasel. He even gave me the Sneasel in a Dusk Ball, which releases with the dark looking energy that I thought was rather cool. Now, onto the gameplay mechanics and how they relate to some aspects of most other turn-based RPGs that I dislike, and why I ultimately like how Pokémon handles them for the most part. In most other RPGs, you will usually have a small set of characters. You may or may not like these characters, but you will be stuck with them. Pokémon, by contrast, has a large number of Pokémon at your disposal. They may not have actual character like they do in the anime, but it's easy to get some level of pet-like emotional attachment to them. Another thing with most RPGs, at least from what I observed, is as your characters grow in level, they will learn newer and stronger moves. However, in most cases, the stronger moves tend to just make the older, weaker moves obsolete, and the characters of your party will tend to use a small pool of moves with little reason to use the older ones. This can affect Pokémon as well, however, due to the typing mechanics, some weaker moves still have utility if a Pokémon of one type can learn and hold weaker moves of a different type to have better type coverage. Speaking of typings, this is a Pokémon staple and something I think most people who haven't played the games are aware about. It was this element of Pokémon that I initially believed where all the major complexity would come from. But it really wasn't that bad. A lot of the matchups are logically based, and I had a matchup chart handy, so it was no big deal really. Where most of the complex elements of Pokémon comes from are the other surprisingly in-depth mechanics that are under the hood. Mechanics that most players can generally ignore and still make it through the game reasonably okay. The first of these is how dual-type Pokémon are affected in terms of typing matchups. This is one that can't really be ignored, but once understood, it will flow nicely with the player's understanding of typings in general. I understand these matchups as a basic multiplier. Normally effective is just 1 times as effective, being super effective is 2 times as effective, being resistant is half as effective, and immunity is a 0 multiplier. With these multipliers in mind, the effectiveness of moves against dual types can be relatively easy to calculate. Double super effective is times 4, double resistant is a quarter, one type being resistant and the other being super effective cancels each other out, and immunity to one type nullifies the weakness to another. On top of the typings, each Pokemon will have their own base stats. These are the basic hit points, attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed. These stats can be further increased through the use of IV breeding or EV training. These were not that complicated to understand as they were explained to me, but they involved quite a bit of grinding, so I ignored them. A Pokemon can also have a particular nature, which can boost one of their base stats by 10% while also nerfing another by 10%. This was much simpler to follow, and you can easily catch a couple of the same Pokemon until you get the desired nature, or make use of an item that is able to change a Pokemon's nature. There are also moves with Stab, or same type attack bonus. Simply put, moves that match the typing of a Pokemon using it will receive an additional 50% effectiveness. And on the subject of Pokemon moves, each Pokemon can only have 4 active at any given time. Initially, I thought this would have been very limiting, and I was initially worried as my Pokemon learned new moves that I would have to commit to my decision then and there. But thankfully, the newer generations of Pokemon lets you swap these moves in and out before any fights. To my understanding, some earlier generations didn't and you were committed, which sucks. And as for the 4 move limit, I did find it streamlined to the decision-making process during a battle. As mentioned before, many moves did become redundant as a Pokemon grew, so it was really about selecting the cream of the crop for each Pokemon. Keeping in mind Stab, while also considering moves of a different type for better type coverage. There was also this whole thing about making sandwiches and acquiring ingredients for new sandwiches, but I could not be bothered with that. And as for actual game progression, there is, of course, the standard gym leaders leading up to the Elite Four and Champion, but also Team Star raids and Titan battles. Because the game is open world, you are, of course, able to freely travel to any of the gym leaders, Team Star bases, or Titans in any order. The problem is that there is no level scaling, so the order in which to do all of this is softly set. It is very easy to accidentally walk into a gym leader or area that you are way under leveled for, and you will get rocked. I was provided a map of all the storied fights and their corresponding levels, so I initially just followed the gym leader route, grinding as I needed to match the levels to allow me to win and move on from there. Also, the gym leaders had some sort of minigame or puzzle to do before you can actually fight them. They were all a stupid waste of time. Once I realized the team star raids and titan battles were required for beating the main game, right before the Elite Four, I decided to go back and tie up loose ends. Upon heading back, I had found I was completely overleveled for a good chunk of these, to the point where they were almost effortless busywork. Although I do know this is primarily my fault. Was I the only one who just wanted to go through the core game with the gym leaders and ignore all the side stuff? Leave a comment down below if you had a similar experience, or if I'm just weird. And as for the team star raids and titan battles themselves, the titan battles were kind of cool at least, having to fight a boss with a massive health pool, but the star raids were really annoying up until the actual fight with the leaders. All it was just spamming the attack button to clear out the base's Pokemon. Any actual strategy or positioning goes out the window because you are given unlimited free revives. Maybe this section could have been a little more interesting if it was a watered down Pokemon Unite and you had direct control over your chosen Pokemon, but even then I doubt it would have been very interesting. But with that nonsense taken care of, I went ahead and prepared for the Elite Four fight. While not the actual endgame, this was built up to be a hard challenge. I had gone through the whole game without hoarding or spamming heals and revives, but at the prospect of fighting 4 full teams in a row without any chance to visit Pokemon Center had me worried. I gotta say, in the Pokemon universe, their pharmaceutical companies must have the Pokemon League in their pocket. Just think of all the profits they make selling healing items to all these in-over-their-head kids just to get through the Elite Four. When I fought them, all of my Pokemon were pretty much lined up level-wise with each of the Elite Four. Each fight, I did lose a few Pokemon, but I had collected enough healing items throughout my natural play that it covered me just fine. Still a fair challenge, though. After them was the champion. What a letdown. I had a harder time with each of the Elite Four members than I did with her. Then, of course, was the fight with your main rival, Nomania? I don't know. The fight itself was fine, at least much better than the champion fight. This fight was built up throughout the game, but I just wasn't feeling it. I don't know, I just found her quite annoying. I don't know if this was the intent, but it just felt like a one-sided friendship and nothing like an actual rivalry. I know this might be a cliche, but I personally prefer a more abrasive rival, someone that you would genuinely dislike and would want to best by the end. After that fight, the game's story will lead you to the endgame area, Area 0. Even though I wasn't all that invested in the story, I did find this area fascinating to explore, and encountering the version-specific Pokemon in this area was rather cool. Pokemon Scarlet had variants of Pokemon that had a more primal ancient look, while Pokemon Violet, the one I played, had futuristic robotic versions of some Pokemon. Which I do have to question, was the implication that these were robotic Pokemon built by a future civilization to resemble Pokemon from the present day? Or were these Pokemon that evolved from present day to robotic matter instead of organic matter? Maybe if I actually read all the story text I'd know, but best not to question the science of Pokemon for my own sanity. Anyway, this area leads to the true final fight, and a rather surprising reveal. The game's professor turns out to be the final boss. Sada for Scarlet and Turo for Violet. Has any past Pokemon game had this reveal of the professor being the big bad at the end? Well, I guess technically not the professor, but rather some robotic AI construct that was imprinted with their personality. They must have bought a ChatGPT-4 subscription. You find out that the original professor got killed, but before that, they went crazy with their obsession in researching Area 0, which resulted in their significant other leaving them. And I rather like this story variation between these two versions, with Pokemon Scarlet having the wife going crazy, and Pokemon Violet having the husband going crazy. The actual fight against them was pretty good, but the subsequent fight, which forces you to use the provided rideable legendary, felt very gamey to me, if that makes any sense. It felt very scripted, and I don't think you can actually lose this fight. There is, from what I understand, some post-game content, but I was content after the final fight and didn't really check any of it out. There was also some DLC that came out, but I haven't gotten that either. All in all, I rather enjoyed my time with Pokemon. While I don't think I can stomach a lot of the frustrations of the turn-based RPG genre as a whole, I do see myself playing more Pokemon games in the future. Drop a follow on my Twitch page where you may see me stream a Pokemon game again, or any other game I happen to be playing, which will primarily be Mario Party, as I play that every Friday. I might also consider hosting Pokemon Showdown games with viewers, as it's pure strategy with none of the grinding, which is more up my alley. I apologize for the more simplistic video. If you enjoyed it, I would appreciate a like, and a sub if you want to see what else I have coming up soon. Join my Discord if you would like to interact with me or my community, as well as get advanced notifications for videos I'm working on, and also suggest video ideas to me. I appreciate you all for watching, and have a good one.